I want to make a couple comments about leadership, and I hope this is helpful in your jobs and all the stuff that you make and sell to help make the United States and the world a better place. But so, we have a chief scientist. I'm kind of looking at Raul and Yamini, but he's getting pretty famous. His name's Jim Harder, and he's written some bestsellers and stuff. But I said to him, he looked kind of peaceful. He's out we have a campus out in Omaha. And I said, anything in your labs that you're coming up with that's new? And he's an understated person, he's whatever the opposite of a salesman or rainmaker is or that kind of a thing. That's what Dr. Harder is. He said to me, I think I can prove that the practice of management no longer works. Just work on that for a minute. That's a lot to think about. And I said, how far? And he said, when you go get your MBA at a well-known school and how they teach you to manage, I'm pretty sure it doesn't work anymore. God, that intrigued me. I said, what's your math? What he went on to say is that there's 100 million full-time jobs in America, and if you ask employees, do you know what's expected of your work? Do you think anybody encourages your development? Just some easy questions like that. 30% of Americans say yes to that. So this morning, 30 million Americans got up and came to work coast to coast in the United States of America and are killing it in their job. They feel good. You know what they're doing? They're creating customers. There's nothing more important than creating customers. That's what makes the whole world work, because that's what drives GDP. If there was a new religion started, I'd start it about that. Only 30 million people make the free enterprise system work, I think. 100 million people. Okay, these people are juiced, spirited. They love working on their teams. You've got some of them in on your teams now. Always have an idea. It works. I thought maybe we'd have 200 million of them. There's only 30 million of them. Now at the other end, what he told me is, he said, are some really miserable people. They hate their jobs, they hate their boss, and they hate your company. But to be in that, I call them miserable people. You know what he calls them? Only a Gallup analyst would call them this, but he calls them actively disengaged. What the hell is that? Well, he said, I don't put you in that category unless you're actively miserable. So what that means is, so if I'm actively miserable, and Yamini, so Jeff says to me, hey, have you heard about Yamini? She won a project down in Mexico City, and we're all going down, and we're going to start the project. We're going to bill half of it right away, and we're going to help us make our numbers for the quarter. And everybody's so excited. We're going to have a great time, and it's a great project, and blah, blah, blah. And everybody's so spirited. And, Yamini, God, you knew she'd pull it out right at the end. I don't want to hear that crap. I'm actively disengaged. I live to squash that stuff out. So do you know what I do because I'm actively disengaged? I go to Yamini's office, sit down, shut the door, and just talk to her until all that inspiration goes away. Then I've had another great day because I'm actively disengaged. That's 20% of the people that came to work today in America. So while you got 30% crushing it, creating new customers, creating GDP, good jobs and all that, you got another 20 million trying to take it apart. In the middle, you have about 50% that are just there, just kind of showing up. Here's what he showed me. It hasn't changed for 20, we've been tracking it for 20 years. It hasn't changed for 20 years. You see, if we were working on it in the practice of management, as we change and we figure out the future of work and all this stuff we're doing, that should be going up. There's no growth at all. We built consistent sampling frames across 160 countries. We asked the world how they're doing. There's 7 billion people, 5 billion adults, and 3 billion people that say what they want more than anything is to have a good job. So we asked, well, do you have one? That's 30 hours of work with a paycheck for a real organization. That's just what we call a good job. Not a great job, not necessarily engaged, but just a real job. There's only 1.2 billion of those in the world. That really surprised me. Do you see? So it means that if there's 3 billion, it means that unemployment in the world is actually about 60%. Now, that's not the way ILO, OECD, or people count it, because if you're working part-time, if you're selling gum and flowers in traffic in Indonesia or somewhere, you're employed by that. But if you have a real job, there's only 1.2 billion. The reason I'm telling you that is we also asked them, do you know what's expected of you at work? Do you have a mission and purpose that's important to you? Some kind of easy questions like that. The world, only 15% are engaged at work. 15% times 1.2, I think that's 150 million. Can you imagine that? So the whole world only has 150 million people that go to work and actually feel like they're contributing to a team, to a company, trying to improve something. I just wanted you to know that as leaders because I think it's really serious. I think we can change it ourselves. I don't think governments can. But it means that human development has stopped. When you stop growing in the job, when companies stop evolving in the workplace, it means that human development has stopped. This is kind of depressing right now. I'll fix it in just 1 minute. But so I went to GDP, because remember, y'all know what GDP is. That's just kind of the total sales of all of it. It's everything we make and sell each other. So if the United States was a company, we'd have about $20 trillion of sales. That's all the stuff that you guys make and sell each other, and I make and sell you, and all that kind of stuff. If we were a company, we'd have $20 trillion of sales, and we'd also have $20 trillion of debt, which isn't a good thing. But the question is, are we growing? And GDP in the United States now for 10 years has grown at about 1.7. Depending upon where you start at, let's just call it 2%. Here's the thing. I hope this is interesting. But if you divide it by the number of citizens, the number keeps getting smaller. So although we're growing a little bit, the amount of GDP per capita, that's the one they don't tell you about in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or Financial Times or The Economist. I don't know why they don't tell us that. It's been going down for 20 years. You guys, there it is. We're not buying and selling as much because our workplaces, whatever we're doing in our workplaces, aren't working quite like we think they are. I went to world GDP. So world GDP is about 80 trillion, 80 to 85. So when we're all making and selling, that's how much there is for the whole world. So somehow we all split that up. The United States has about 22% of it. At one time, the United States had 40% of it. Can you imagine how dominant that was? But world GDP, remember you got India and China in there. The other BRICS didn't work out as well. But it was supposed to be, the world was supposed to grow at about 5%. Then they went, well, maybe 4.5. Well, maybe 4. Then it went to 3.5, now down to 2.5. But so the same thing is happening. While population is growing, we're producing and selling less. But then it comes back to people. It comes back to ideas, and it comes back to entrepreneurship. Those are the two things. When you fuse those together, you get world growth, and you get human development, and you get peace, and you get families, and you get all the good stuff. Somebody's got to fix that. So the guy that, I'm just going to look at my watch here, my clock here. The guy that founded our company was Dr. George Gallup. He's a really famous American. He makes that list of the 100 most influential Americans, not the real good one that has Lincoln on it and Martin and George and all those types. I'm not picking on Time Magazine, if anybody's from Time Magazine, the one with chefs and yo-yo magicians and that kind of thing. So I guess I am picking on him. But he was actually an academic, not really a business person or an entrepreneur. And what Dr. Gallup did is he was a guy that just kind of went around, but he wanted to figure out, first of all, what Americans wanted out of life. He wanted to know what their will was. He wanted to know what made a great life for them. He called it the Great American Dream. Then he wrote it, then he'd write that down. And he interviewed thousands, but that's all he was doing. He didn't even want to do presidential polls and all that. He wanted to figure out what the will was. He had a point that he made that it might seem subtle, but it's brilliant, I think. If you ask him why he was doing it, his answer was, because I love democracy. He said, there's just nothing in the world like this democracy. He says, but I'm afraid leaders, if they have the wrong premises, if they have the wrong foundations or beliefs about what's on the mind of citizens, so they're wrong, they'll create policies and they'll create rules and they'll create regulations, whatever, in a mistaken way, and they'll ruin democracy. So all I want to do is make sure that we keep reporting the will of America. What a great mission and purpose. So that he did that 80 years ago. I've been there 30 years. I've been CEO for 30 years. Some people, Yamini, think that's too long. But so as I look back over the will, it started out with religion. And people wanted to pray to the God they wanted to, and they didn't want to be hassled about that. People wanted peace. So my dad and my uncles all fought in World War II, and they didn't want any more of that. That was pretty ugly. 400,000 dead. My generation was more Vietnam, 50,000. But peace. Another thing was the Great American Dream was about having a family. Another one was owning a home. So, but somewhere in there, peace, family, and was the Great American Dream. But there's a lot you can do with that when you know that's what it is. But it's changed. So those are no longer the Great American Dream, and it's especially, I think, driven by millennials and to a great extent by women in the workplace. So religion, peace, family, own a home. It's changed the primary will of America being to have a good job. But you could argue we're not addressing that. If you look at the subprime meltdown, that was Washington trying to get everybody to a home they could purchase. That's what that whole thing was about. Subprime, we made it real easy to get homes, and $3 trillion got wiped out, shook the whole world. You see how wrong we were about that? This one's pretty interesting, but families are on the decline. In America, we don't really. I'm old. I've been married for 30. When I'm with a group, nobody's been married 30. Nobody's been married 35. He thinks that's nobody's. I'm the only guy who's been married 35 years. But we have a different relationship to family. A lot of people my age have been married 4 or 5 times. Some of you have nothing against it. I'm just saying. But see how it's changed the very fabric of our society? Did you know that birth rates in my lifetime is in half? So when I was hanging around my neighborhood, it was nothing to have 5, 6 kids, that kind of thing. Now it's down to less than 2. But you see, the will of the citizens have changed, because now what they've put first is a job. Marriage rates, people get married like 17 years later than my generation did. And of course, fewer kids. And it's not important to them to own a home. I wanted to tell you that as leaders. And I've written about it. Our senior editor, Jeff Brewer's right here. He knows that it drives me crazy, and I roll around on the floor. But we sell a lot of books. Gallup sells millions of books. But I think this is one of our most important subjects. But I'm going to show you a slide. I don't do slide presentations. I don't have anything. This is like my 3rd one ever. And I don't have anything against slides. I just don't really know where you get them. But I got one. I only have one slide, but I still refer to it as my deck. But what's in my deck today is what. I'm getting tired of the word millennials, but millennials and women, and now Zers coming in. It's about half the workforce. What they want that's different. And I've been doing this at universities, the best universities, and all of that. It's saying if we don't make this change, I think it's as big a problem as climate change. That looks pretty ugly to me, if that's really coming. This one comes a lot faster. But it's where economic energy and dynamism just keeps grinding down. And I don't think governments can change it, but I think you and I can. on my deck, my one-slide deck, I have the old style of management that doesn't work and is ruining the world. And on the other side, I have what we got to switch to. Can you please present the slide? Can you see that okay? The first one's almost perfect for me. People don't care as much about their paycheck as they used to. Purpose trumps it. Now, you've got to have fair pay. It's got to be fair. It's got to be, you got to understand it. But you'll never attract real talent until the purpose of the job has something more than pay. Is something more than pay. Now, I say this because I went to school at the University of Nebraska in business school. I love the University of excuse me. I love the University of Nebraska. We just gave them a load of money, and I didn't learn anything. Seriously, zero. But you had to go do something. They give you case histories. Can you imagine that, doing a case history on John Deere tractors or something out there, and then going to a job now? I called on Bridgewater yesterday. Doesn't matter, but there's nothing from that. How would I draw upon a case history of John Deere for that meeting? And of course, you have a whole university is in your pocket now. But I went to school because I wanted to get a paycheck for $20,000. If I could get a salary of $20,000, that's all I wanted. Well, did you want anything else? Yes, I wanted to find a woman. I wanted to have 3 kids and own my home. I'm the perfect, classic old guy. That's exactly what I wanted. You know what? I got them all. I make $20,000, a little more than $20,000. I have a wife. I have 3 kids, and I own my home, because that was the great American dream, and I nailed it. If I was in college, you came to me and you said to me, what's the mission and purpose that's most important to you in the job that you are going to get? I would say, I honest to God have no idea what you're talking about. I would say, are you a hippie from Berkeley, or what the hell's going on here? There was no excuse me. There was no such thing as mission and purpose when I first started in the workplace. It was just my paycheck. But now when teams come to work, unless you can think somehow what you're doing is connected to changing the world, you'll never recruit real talent. You'll have Barbie and Kens in suits or T-shirts or whatever they were. I probably shouldn't have said Barbie and Ken. Can you strike Barbie and Ken? I assume nobody's wearing a wire, but you have to figure out what kind of a contribution you're making, because since that's the great American dream, if when I come to work and my job doesn't have meaning, this is the big shift, my life doesn't have meaning. And so if as managers, the teams that we run, or the companies that we run, if we don't put meaning in it, we'll never get that 30% to 60%. If the United States could move that number from 30% to 60% and the actively disengaged from 20 to 10, America would, I don't mean to be talking America here, but America would overwhelm the world. We'd probably have more than a 40%. Another one that our team found, this one was really interesting to me, that we've been really wrong about, is we thought satisfaction was important. I think Google threw us off a little bit. I think Google's one of the greatest companies ever, not because of volleyball courts and ping pong and free food. I think it's because some experts created a real masterpiece, where everything that man has ever thought, or humankind's ever thought and written down, is just right here. That's quite a masterpiece. I don't think it's because a bunch of young people could take scooters out to volleyball courts. That's what our research shows. But imagine, isn't it kind of condescending if I said to Yamini, I said, she's a millennial type, but if I said, we'd love to have you come to work at Gallup. And she said to me, tell me about Gallup. What could I do that's me? I said, do I have a deal for you? One of the things, Yamini, is I know that you're very athletic. And we have croquet, we have ping pong, and I give you breaks during the day when you can go play ping pong and play foosball and stuff like that. She goes, well, that's just great. I do those at home. I don't really need those. Tell me more about the mission and purpose of Gallup and what I might be doing. Okay, we'll get you free lunch on Fridays. How does that sound? But you see the road I'm going down? I'm going down the road of satisfaction. You got to be very careful because she's not looking for satisfaction. When you really dig down into what she wants to know about her development. What can she become? Do I know that she's got potential? And then what am I going to do to take an interest in that? But if I don't show that interest, this kind of goes back to stars, and none of our organizations grow in the absence of stars. Unless you switch to that kind of a system, you won't attract, or if you do happen to hire one, you won't keep them because you're on the ping pong page rather than on the development. If you look at three societies, I'm going to do China, India, and Japan, because they're the ones that are stuck back the farthest of really important societies. And we were just talking about this for a second. But it's really hierarchical and top down. You got to be real careful about that. But if I tell Jeff to do something, I tell Raul to do something, and you go, well, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't need to you, because I do the thinking, you do the doing, or I get ideas, I don't do work, you do work. You get the point? That's a long way from being a coach. So maybe what I say to Raul, rather than shut up and do it, maybe I say to him, Raul, you got a couple strengths I really need this next month. We need a breakthrough in Berlin. I'm going to put you on a plane to Berlin. You got to go fix this. One of your best themes is restorative. You've been able to fix anything, and here's what I want you to do. And then I really coach you. When you get there, we got a miserable team. We got a client that's mad. Can you do this and that? Then you and I talk. It's not unlike preparing for a big football game, a big soccer game, a cricket game, whatever, in that we watch game film together. And I tell you, don't do this. Make sure that you go over here and that kind of a thing. But you see what I am? I'm coaching him. I'm not bossing him. It's tricky, but I think the whole world's got to move to that before you coach. But why am I coaching him? Because he knows Jim's really trying to help him win. And at the very end of the day, that's why you want to develop, because you want to win more. But if you don't have a boss that takes that kind of an interest, then he starts thinking about, I'm going to go somewhere else. I think that's a world we live in. You guys all know this one. But we did what I think is the biggest change management project ever. We did it for Accenture. And they have 400,000 employees and 80,000 managers. One of the things they do is they do an annual review just once. This blows me away. So I actually don't give, let's say you're a report of mine, I actually don't give him any real feedback except once a year. So let's say he goes to do, I said, I love what you did down in Miami, but you know what, could you have done this or this or this or this? But you hear that I'm coaching him. And what I'm telling you about Accenture is not a secret. They've printed this, they've talked about it, and everything else. I saved the feedback for his annual review. But maybe I have something real small, like I say, remember, when you go to see Carlyle, Cerberus, and Goldman Sachs, make sure you wear a tie because those guys are still wearing ties, something like that. But see, then I wait a year to tell him, and he says, well, why didn't you just, you know about those places. Why didn't you just tell me then? because the system doesn't allow it. I kind of keep it here. But annual reviews, are being pulled out because you talk about all the stupid things they teach you about managing and developing people, but what you really want is an ongoing conversation. You guys, what about social media? How could I not type him and say, hey, are you coming out of the meeting in Miami? How did it go? What happened? Did you drop that line I told you? You see what I mean? So we could be talking all the time, not just once a year. There are so many ratings at Accenture. They guess that the amount of times, remember, this whole table would rate him, and this whole table would rate him too, and you got to go into a room. The time off the floor to rate, they estimated at $1 billion a year. You see all the low-hanging fruit? I mean, you also can make a lot of money by just doing it right. But by switching, eliminating annual review, are you with me on this stuff? And going to an annual conversation, it not only booms and explodes human development, you also can save $1 billion. You also can save $1 billion. This is this is one of Gallup's big breakthroughs. A guy named Don Clifton. I'm Jim Clifton. That's a different Clifton. But he spent his whole life, he was a professor, and figuring out, he didn't believe that what they were teaching at the business school, he needed more proof, because what they said is that to make Yamini better, what I do is I go and find out what her weaknesses are. So I say, Yamini, here's some things really wrong. You're always late, and you got a bad personality. I don't know, whatever it is. I can say that about her. She doesn't have a bad personality. She has a wonderful one, but you get the point. But so I write those down. I'm her boss. And you know what the theory is, you guys? Hell, we still have it. I fix those weaknesses. And then we call them gaps. So I say, Yami, sit down. Here are some gaps you have. Let's really work on them. And then I see her go, hey, Yamini, can you come in here? We just had another one. You got a couple more. I found 2 more gaps. You got like 7 of them. Do you see what's happening? I'm becoming the world's leading living authority on what's wrong with Yamini. I know more of what's wrong with her than her mother does. But that's the relationship we have. But how much fun is that meeting with me? That's our system. If you think that system doesn't need to be upended, I think you're watching I think you're on the wrong channel. Speaking of books, Amazon told us that our Strengths book was the single best-selling book they have ever had. We sold almost 20 million of them, I think. It's incredible. It is working. It is. But what we found is that while her weaknesses, it's really important I know them, but you know what you do? You minimize them. Let's say that she has strengths. It's really easy for her to go see people she doesn't know. As a matter of fact, she can't wait to get there because she wants to find out what they're doing and what they use for this kind of technology and blah, blah, blah. And when she's put on the spot, she also experiences cognitive expansion. Her creativity goes up and all kinds of things. She gets ideas and the prospect or the client goes, holy cow, where's this woman coming up with this kind of stuff? That's her moment. That moment doesn't come to her unless she's in what they call flow. You read that stuff by Csikszentmihalyi? Flow is a fantastic moment. When you have cognitive expansion, you're actually smarter. Your IQ goes up and all that. There's also something called cognitive contraction. That means as your boss, I made you dumber. But when I grind on her weaknesses, let's say that, okay, let's just keep going with that. So she obviously is a great person to go win business, but her follow-through is terrible. She's terrible with e-paperwork and all that kind of stuff. I have a choice. I either sit down and say, you got to get this damn paperwork right, or you're going to drive me crazy. You're not going home until it's right and it's on my desk and blah, 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 blah. But see, I'll just grind the life out of her with those weaknesses. But maybe Jeff comes over and he goes, he says to me, have you ever thought about just getting her a good assistant? Why don't you have the assistant do it? Or Bob's got some extra time, why don't you have him? But see, what you got to do is, she does have those weaknesses, as in this example, so you got to mitigate them, but you better get human development right. The only thing that actually explodes and develops your whole life are your strengths. It almost doesn't matter what they are as long as you know what they are. The guy that invented this, he and I spent his whole life doing it. He died about 15 years ago, but before all of it exploded, so he got kind of a Grandma Moses thing going. But he gave a great example. So Dr. Gallup was basically a teacher. Work on that one. He loved to teach. He loved to teach reporters, or that's how he pulled off management. He'd sit around. He just loved to teach. People all over the world talk about that he was one of their teachers. Became one of the 100 most influential people. You take a guy like Jack Welch. They used to always try to, When I would go to leadership course, they always try to turn me into Jack Welch or Colin Powell. Jack Welch was one of the great acquirers of all time. He could acquire companies and, like you, get the right price. So it's good for everybody. Quite a gift. One of the great CEOs of the last, 50 years. Colin Powell told a Gallup group that he never wanted to be anything but the best soldier in the world. That's just what he worked at. He did. He became maybe the best soldier in the world, one of the most famous leaders ever. What's the point? The point is that Don Clifton said just before he died, he said that leadership scientists are making a mistake because they're trying to find one taxonomy of a leader. You get it? They're trying to find that one, and he said there isn't one. He said these leaders pull it off in their own way because somewhere along the line they learn to leverage their strengths and not let people hold them back by their weaknesses. Those are three really famous Americans. They have more differences than they do things in common. Can you imagine if somebody was trying to make Jack Welch the teacher? What if you're trying to make nice old Dr. Gallup the acquirer? Or Jack Welch, he might have been a pretty good soldier, I don't know. But one of the big solutions, one of the big takeaways when we manage differently is we've got to figure out, and we've got to start with a premise that says weaknesses never turn into strengths, but strengths develop infinitely and throughout your whole life. I'm just going to make one more point. Then we have 10 or 15 minutes for questions. See if I got, yep. For me, it was just a job. That's what I was trying to get. What you have to do as managers, you got to consider that this is my life. And I think that's the biggest change. But you know, if democracy is about the will of the people, and as leaders, all of us, regardless if we run teams or if we run companies, somehow we got to deliver that will a little bit better. Overall, things are pretty good in America. You know, fewer deaths by war, and when you ask people how they're feeling pretty good. There is so much opportunity for us to just blow the workplace through the roof. We're not as good as we think we are, but the fix is pretty easy, and it also can be fixed by us. We don't have to change presidents. We don't have to change governors. We don't have to change mayors. My only concern is that if you and I don't do it, I don't think anybody else is going to. So with that, I'll say thank you, and it's great to see both of you guys again. And now I'll take a few questions.
So when we think about innovation, we think about leadership, and I really have to applaud our keynote this morning. I mean, it was just phenomenal when he talked about focus on the strengths, less on the weaknesses, and to create a culture of partnership. And that's what we have to do with our clients, is to create a culture of partnership. And I'm very pleased and humbled and honored to have a very, very dynamic panel this afternoon for you. Let's have Ms. Melton Denser, the VP of Platform Capabilities at John Wiley & Sons, to please come on up. Let's give her a round of applause, please. Mr. Kanwar Singh, who's the Vice President of Digital Transformation of Operations at Elsevier, my former stopping grounds. Come on up, Kanwar. Now, this is interesting. Our next panelist, I called her the other day just to do a briefing with the panels, as I always do. And I says, you know, Juanita, I think we met at a PSP event. She goes, we met way before then. I said, really? She says, oh, you forgot. Our children went to people in